30 miles off the coast of Connecticut, a Russian spy ship sits only days after an armed Russian warplane carried out what was called a mock attack against a U.S. ship, according to a U.S. defense official, reported by CNN. This Russian spy vessel, called the Leonov, is a Vishna-class spy ship designed to intercept intelligence signals. It has been seen off the coast of Virginia before, in 2014 and 2015, but being spotted off the coast of Delaware and Connecticut is the farthest north it has ever been. The U.S. Navy is keeping a close eye on it. Meanwhile, this past Friday, the USS Porter was sailing in the Black Sea when it had 3 encounters with Russian aircraft. The encounter was deemed unsafe and unprofessional because of how closely the planes flew to the American destroyer. U.S. intelligence gathered that the planes were carrying out mock attacks on the American ship. Moscow denied that its aircraft made any unsafe maneuvers.
An American man is going to prison for domestic terrorism. Cody Start pled guilty in a North Carolina courtroom to 253 counts of terrorism and 251 counts of making false bomb reports to businesses throughout the state. Start apologized in court, saying he was young and dumb. The FBI and police tracked down Start last year in his native West Virginia. At the time, he was on probation after prior convictions for making similar threats. Assistant District Attorney Scott Lippert acknowledged that Start's actions cost a huge amount of money to fire, police, and other emergency agencies and workers, and as a result forced units to respond to hoax threats, taking away workers from anything else actually going on. The 27-year-old Start was sentenced to 11 to 21 years in prison. Judge Todd Pomeroy also imposed judgment for an additional 10 to 20 years of suspended sentences and placed him on supervised probation over a period of 36 months. If Start violates the terms of his probation, those sentences will be activated and added onto the end of his initial active sentence. He still faces similar pending charges in other North Carolina counties. For Fox News, I'm Rob Demetrius.
Japan offers its help in fighting piracy and kidnapping in the waters surrounding the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Japanese Vice Minister for International Affairs, Ro Manabe, made the proposal during a Japan-Philippines ministerial meeting on February 10th, though the Philippine Department of National Defense only announced the news February 14th. The two countries have yet to finalize what form Japan's assistance will take. Piracy off the southern Philippines is forcing ship owners to take different routes, costing them time and money. Dozens of sailors and foreigners have also been kidnapped by the Philippine terror group Abu Sayyaf. Japan and the Philippines have been strengthening defense cooperation through the exchange of defense equipment. In March, the Philippines will receive 2 of the 5 TC-90 aircraft Japan leased to the country to upgrade its defense capabilities. Japan also provides capacity building assistance in humanitarian aid and disaster response. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Camry Caldwell.
A panel of scientists releases a report supporting eventual genetic engineering in human embryos. The panel, formed by the National Academy of Sciences and the National Academy of Medicine, determined that it will be necessary to allow some gene editing under tight restrictions. The subject has long been taboo in the scientific community. There are concerns the practice will exaggerate social inequality and could create unintended genetic diseases. In the report released February 14th, the panel endorsed gene editing only to prevent babies from being born with serious diseases and disabilities. Even then, the scientists say it must be tracked through multiple generations in order to ensure there are no unintended genetic side effects. The panel is also concerned that an all-out ban would be useless if other countries pursue genetic modification unregulated. They hope the United States will set a good example by putting tight regulations in place. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Matt Paul.
Russia says it will not return Crimea to Ukraine. Russia's foreign ministry said Wednesday, February 15th, quote, "We don't give back our own territory. Crimea is territory belonging to the Russian Federation." This comes after White House spokesman Sean Spicer said Tuesday Trump expects Russia to hand Crimea back to Ukraine. Trump also took to Twitter Wednesday morning saying, quote, "Crimea was taken by Russia during the Obama administration. Was Obama too soft on Russia?" The president's position was different during a July interview with ABC, when he said, quote, "The people of Crimea, from what I've heard, would rather be with Russia than where they were." Crimea did vote to join Russia in 2014, but Ukraine claims the referendum was forced on the people after Russian troops entered the area. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson meets with Russia's foreign minister in Germany Thursday. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Camry Caldwell.
You know, whatever you think of Michael Flynn, and clearly Flynn acknowledges that he at the very least misled Vice President Pence and caused Vice President Pence to go out there and give statements that Flynn knew were wrong, and he has rightly submitted his resignation. But the fact that he was taken out like this should be alarming to everyone. What you have is behind the scenes, the intel officials at the very highest levels of the intelligence community were gathering this information, and they were pushing it out in order to take Michael Flynn out for political reasons. And those people were abetted by holdover bureaucrats who are also operating out of politics. And then, of course, a willing media that of course, you know, a lot of these people, the same media who refused to report on some of the emails that were clearly stolen from the DNC on the grounds that they were stolen from the DNC. They don't have any of those qualms now. And so, you know, anybody who is concerned about the Comey involvement in the general election we should be very concerned about this right now.
You know, John Roberts was just talking about finding the guilty parties. I think you rarely, if ever, find the perpetrators.
It's going to be very difficult, but especially because you have so many people on the inside, and you can't discount the holdover bureaucrats. They look at Donald Trump and they are terrified. They don't know what he's going to do, but they are very, very scared about what he means for their future and their jobs. And so, you know, I think you're exactly right, Bill. It's going to be very, very difficult to root that stuff out.
Elon Musk says humans must merge with machinery in order to stay relevant in a world of increasingly advanced artificial intelligence. Speaking at the World Government Summit in Dubai, the Tesla and SpaceX CEO said humans are limited by the speed at which they transmit data. Musk proposed a high-bandwidth connection to the human brain would allow us to transmit digital info faster than our current fastest method, typing. Musk says an artificial general intelligence has the potential to make humans irrelevant. He sees integration with technology as a necessary step in order to avoid this. He also cautioned governments to monitor AI development and not let it get out of hand. Musk expressed concerns about the future of AI, such as the more immediate problem of self-driving cars replacing driving jobs. He believes this would have the potential to eliminate 15% of jobs worldwide. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Matt Paul.
A transgender model graces the cover of Vogue Paris for the first time. Other magazines have had trans people on their covers before, but this is a first for Vogue Paris, a renowned publication running since the 1920s. The March cover features Brazilian Valentina Sampaio, who has more than 36,000 followers on Instagram. Editor Emmanuel Alt wrote in her editorial column, quote, "Trans people, the ultimate symbol of a rejection of conformity, are icons that Vogue supports and chooses to celebrate." She goes on to say, quote, "But only when a transgender person poses on the front cover of a fashion magazine and it is no longer necessary to write an editorial on the subject will we know that the battle is won." Sampaio was on the cover of Elle magazine Brazil last year and has worked for L'Oréal Paris. The March issue of Vogue Paris hits newsstands February 23rd. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Camry Caldwell. The U.S. Senate votes to overturn a regulation preventing mentally ill people from buying guns. On February 15th, the Republican-led Senate voted 57-43 to strike down the gun control measure. It required the Social Security Administration to report mentally ill individuals to the FBI's background check system. That information was then used to determine if they could buy a gun or not. The regulation was implemented after the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in 2012, which killed 20 kids and 6 adults. The shooter in that incident had been diagnosed with several mental disorders. Gun rights advocates argued the rule prevented mentally ill people who aren't a threat to society from buying guns, like people with eating or sleeping disorders. But Oregon Senator Ron Wyden argued anyone who thought they were being treated unfairly could have just appealed. The measure is now headed to President Donald Trump, who is expected to sign it. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Camry Caldwell.
After the third warmest January on record, researchers at Palmer Station in Antarctica are clinging on to the last of the Adelie penguins. These penguins were the models for the birds in the movie Happy Feet, but they are not so happy right now. The swiftly changing environment has caused a massive drop-off in what was once a crowded island. At their peak, the penguins numbered 9,000, but now researchers say that there are only 1,200 left. As the sea ice continues to retreat, on March 14, 2014, a once massive glacier split in two, creating an island and destroying the Adelie penguin population.
California officials are under pressure to drain the lake behind battered Oroville Dam as new storms began to roll into Northern California. 3 storms are expected, and forecasters say the first 2 storms could drop a total of 5 inches of rain in higher elevation. However, the third storm could be more powerful. California Department of Water Resources Chief Bill Croyle said water was draining at about 4 times the rate that it was flowing in, and the repairs should hold at the nation's tallest dam. About 100,000 cubic feet of water was flowing from the reservoir each second, enough to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool.
According to a report on Wednesday, staff at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency have been told that Donald Trump will sign new executive orders to reshape the agency. Once his pick for the agency's new administrator, Scott Pruitt, is confirmed, Trump has promised to cut environmental rules in the U.S. as a way to bolster drilling and coal mining industries, but has vowed to do so without compromising air and water quality in the country. Even though Trump has expressed doubts about climate change and promised during his campaign to pull the U.S. out of a global pact to combat it, he has softened that stance since his presidential election win in November.
City officials in New York have called for a renewed effort to cull the city's rodent population after diseased rat urine has killed at least 1 person and sickened 2 others in an outbreak of a rarely seen infection. According to the health department Tuesday, the outbreak of leptospirosis began in December, and all 3 cases were traced to a single block area of the Bronx, New York's northernmost borough. Leptospirosis, while treatable with antibiotics, is a potentially deadly bacterial infection spread by rodents and certain other animals that can cause fever, vomiting, and kidney damage. While the department did not identify the patients, nor would they comment on exactly how the 3 people were exposed to the infected rat urine, typically humans get infected through contact with tainted water.
Absolutely. Very consequential meeting here. It will, I think, signal a significant shift from the Obama era. Having visited Israel just last year, the 2-state solution is, to say it best, on life support and actually not by any on the ground remotely viable. So what I think you may see from this meeting is a recognition that a way forward is standing more strongly with Israel, maybe moving the embassy, certainly opposing the Iran deal, and standing shoulder to shoulder with Bibi Netanyahu. Settlements is an important part of why the 2-state solution is no longer viable. You go to Judea and Samaria, so-called West Bank, and the issues on the ground have changed the dynamics of a 2-state solution.
You recently went and spent some time.
Yeah, no, I was on the ground. I walked in these so-called settlements. They're not the boogeyman that the left and others will try to make them out to be, but they are a reason why the 2-state solution is no longer as viable. And Israel needs them for security, ultimately, in an existential threat.
So one of the things we've wondered were there's early reports that we might even see our U.S. embassy moved to Jerusalem, and what that would look like. And if, you've heard other presidents say that they would, maybe do that, but really with the warming of this relationship, could we see that?
Honestly, this is exactly what I thought it would be. I thought it would sort of be a love fest between Netanyahu and Donald Trump. Most people know they've been friends for years and years. I didn't know he had a relationship with the Kushners, but now we do as well. And as we said before on the couch, it's just a complete and utter reset of our relationship with Israel, and it should really be a, time of good faith for America and Israel right now.
So his comments, Melissa, started with recognizing a country that had survived in the face of genocide. He went on to say that I will do more to prevent Iran from ever developing a nuclear weapon. Yeah. Ever. I mean it.
Absolutely. I think what was most significant in conjunction with those comments was the fact that those two do not see eye to eye on everything. I mean, when you heard that exchange you talked about before about I'd like to see you pull back on the settlements a little bit, Netanyahu went, and made a joke about, well, that didn't sound, very promising. And Netanyahu said, well, that's the art of a deal. They're joking back and forth. So they're not in lockstep. You don't have to believe they agree on absolutely everything, but there's no tension around that. They're still dealing and working, and there's a great amount of trust. That's very interesting. It doesn't mean they're going to agree on everything. It doesn't mean Trump's going to go along, the president's going to go along with everything that Netanyahu says, but they are very close. That's that's significant.
Also important to point out, as we had been teasing leading up to that joint news conference, that he would be asked about the recent resignation of Michael Flynn. Sorry, I just lost that on my page here. But he did react to that in a very similar way that we have seen him, saying that he was very unfairly treated during the entire process, but he really didn't go any further than that.
Well, he didn't say fake news. He said fake media, I think it was, in pointing that out. But I do think the reason they were so cozy and comfortable is that I think they both understand that Israel and the United States represent the nexus of Western civilization. You bring in a post-Brexit UK, it is an understanding that a lot of what we value in this world is under siege, and if we're not friends and have each other's backs, then the future is bleak. So that the beginning is at least understanding that at a gut level, which is clear those two men did.
Well, and he said it, just as you said, America and Israel are two nations that cherish, value all human nations.
A new report released Wednesday states that hate groups are growing since the rise of President Trump, specifically groups characterized as anti-Muslim. The Southern Poverty Law Center releases an annual Year in Hate report, which tracks the size and number of known hate groups in the U.S. As reported by BuzzFeed, the number of anti-Muslim hate groups has nearly tripled from 34 in 2015 to 101 in 2016. Hate groups in the U.S. grew for a second year in a row. In total, SPLC counted 917 last year, up from 892 in 2015. This has resulted in a rise in harassment and violence reported by civil rights groups, with the FBI reporting that anti-Muslim hate crimes were up 67% in 2015. Anti-Muslim and white supremacist rhetoric from top-level officials have extremists believing they have a voice in the White House as white supremacy experiences a rebirth in the alt-right movement. Black separatist groups have also grown in number in response to national attention to police killings and increases in violence. It seems undeniable that Trump's reckless populist campaign has left a legacy of hatred, violence, and division, Mark Potok, the report's author, wrote. 2016 was, by any accounting, a banner year for hate. The White House has yet to comment on this report.
China lodges a diplomatic protest with India due to the visit of a delegation of Taiwanese legislators. The delegation, made up of 3 members of the Taiwanese parliament, arrived on February 13th for a 3-day visit. Their itinerary includes a visit to the plant of a Taiwanese steel company. A Chinese foreign ministry spokesman said China had lodged, quote, solemn representations with India and advised the nation to adhere to the One China policy. The One China policy, adopted by Beijing, states that Taiwan is a breakaway province and no country can have formal diplomatic ties with both Beijing and Taipei. Consequently, few countries have formal relations with Taiwan. Meanwhile, the Indian Ministry of External Affairs released a statement claiming that the delegation was unofficial. It said there have been unofficial visits in the past for various purposes, and nothing should be read into the visit. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Matt Paul.